God Almighty's takbir is one of the greatest and most honorable types of remembrance. And because of the great importance of takbir, God Almighty has prescribed it in the most noble and exalted places, such as prayer, fasting, Hajj, holidays, jihad, and others. Meaning, God is great. It is the glorification of the Lord, blessed and most high, and that nothing is greater or greater than him. So every great thing is less than his majesty. For he is the one to whom necks bowed, and the tyrants humbled themselves before him, and faces were humbled before him, and he subdued everything. And creatures bowed down to him and humbled themselves because of the greatness of his majesty, pride, greatness, exaltation, and power of things. And it became subdued and diminished before his hands and under his rule and oppression of the creatures. God is greater than everything. God is greater than everything that comes to your mind. God is greater than for anyone to comprehend him. God is greater than for eyes to perceive him. God is greater than for him to be like or similar to him, appear or equal. And there is no one equal to him. God is greater than all his creatures. And his attributes are greater and greater than the attributes of his creatures. And he, glory be to him, does not resemble his creatures. And his attributes do not resemble the attributes of his creatures. So his mercy is much greater than the mercy of his creatures. And his knowledge is much greater than the knowledge of his creatures. His power is much greater than the power of his creatures. And so on with the rest of his attributes. He's saying, the Almighty, the majestic. And his greatness is great, meaning, his greatness is complete greatness. And it is said, the most eloquent word for the Arabs in the meaning of veneration and reverence, his Allah is the greatest, meaning he described him as being greater than all things on the authority of Omar. May God be pleased with him. The servant saying Allah is the greatest is better than this world and what in which. And in this divine command to glorify him, glory be to him, the Most High, there is a warning that the servant, even if he exaggerates in exalting and praising him, and strives in obedience and praise, must admit his shortcomings in that, and know that the status of God Almighty is greater, more majestic, and greater than what humans think, and that the righteous people, no matter how much they worship God Almighty, will he fulfill his rights, and they will not repay his blessings. Thus, the status of takbir, the majesty of his ability, the greatness of his status, and his position in religion become clear. Takbir is not a meaningless word, or a word without content, but rather it is a great word that contains great meanings and great purposes. What shows the greatness of takbir and the majesty of its value is that the entire religion is considered an elaboration of the word God is great. So the Muslim performs all acts of obedience and avoids all forbidden things to glorify God Almighty, to glorify his status, the Almighty, and to fulfill his rights. Glory be to him. Takbir does not only mean that God Almighty is great, but rather it means that God Almighty is greater than all things to the servant. As the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, said to Ani bin Hadim, may God be pleased with him, while inviting him to Islam. O Adi bin Hadim, what a shame it is to be said, there is no God but God. So is there any God but God? I don't mind being told, God is the greatest. So is there anything greater than God Almighty? It is said, so I converted to Islam and saw his face rejoiced. The great status of takbir is indicated by the following. God commanded to enlarge in his mighty book. Takbir is one of the 4 words that are the best speech after the Quran, and they are the most beloved speech to God Almighty. As proven in the authentic hadith, the most beloved words except God Almighty are 4. Glory be to God, praise be to God. There is no God but God, God is great, and may he not harm you. Which one did you start with? And with the takbir the gates of heaven are opened, on the authority of Abdullah bin Omar. May God be pleased with them both, he said, while we were praying with the messenger of God. May God bless him and grant him peace. A man from among the people said, God is great, great. And praise be to God greatly, and glory be to God morning and evening, the messenger of God. May God bless him and grant him peace, said, who said such and such? A man said, I am. A messenger of God, he said, I am amazed at her. The gates of heaven were opened for her. Ibn Omar said, I have not left them since I've heard the messenger of God. May God bless him and grant him peace. Say that. The spiritual reward of saying God is great is that it brings peace and tranquility to the hearts and brings people closer to God. Let us make saying God is great a part of our daily lives, and let us enjoy its spiritual impact that brings tranquility and closeness to God. When we ride in a car or plane, at the beginning of any action, we turn to God by saying God is great, and our lives become trusting in our Creator, God.